welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to present key findings and the implications we see for broadband service providers from our recent analysis of broadband usage data. In the second quarter of this year, the world began to emerge from the pandemic, only to be faced with COVID-19 variants, such as the now dominant Delta. With vaccination rates climbing, organizations started to think through and implement return-to-work policies that incorporated in-house safety protocols with work-from-home policies, often resulting in hybrid work approaches. This tentative return had its impact on broadband usage, and the industry appears to have settled into normal usage patterns. However, with growth trends already in place, it was at historic levels of bandwidth consumption and accelerated higher speed tier demands. Through our analysis of the data and these trends, we're excited to share with you these results, including a continued strong correlation between elevated usage and accelerating speed demand. This, along with the kinds of solutions and counsel OpenVault provides, enables broadband providers to identify and proactively approach subscribers with an upgrade package that will improve their quality of experience while improving your ARPU. Welcome. I'm Larry Siegel, and I'll be serving as your host on today's webinar. I'm going to talk a bit about our role in developing this groundbreaking report, and then turn it over to our CEO and founder, Mark Trudeau, who will take us on a deep dive into the key findings and their implications for broadband operators, especially on how they can take the same views we have on data usage and leverage that for improving subscriber satisfaction and increasing revenue. If you have any questions, please submit them on the Q&A, and we'll address it toward the end of our session. Just a bit about us. We are the world's only solutions provider focused exclusively on optimizing networks and driving revenue for broadband operators. This is, we're in our 11th year of providing industry-leading solutions and counsel to help you decide what to do about it. We've focused exclusively on helping broadband providers manage their networks more effectively and proactively, improve revenues and profit margins, and provide subscribers with a higher quality of experience. Everything starts with the analytics of actual usage and network data, which includes a vast amount of built-in deep domain expertise we have. These results then drive a broad set of actionable and automated solutions, which are 100% cloud-based, easy and quick to deploy, and generate industry-leading return on investment. We unlock the power of your data. Our tools gather broadband usage data, as we talked about, generated by our 150 plus broadband provider customers in North America, Latin America, and Europe. And once within our platform, we create a holistic pool of data across millions of subscriber usage data records, into which we execute a series of powerful analytic queries ranging from overall usage, tiered usage, plan and plan migrations, and geographic characteristics. These then yield insights, which have implications for broadband providers. We share these insights and their implications for providers with this quarterly OpenVault Broadband Insights Advisory, or OVBIs. Now, to get into what we found in the second quarter and how that compares to year-over-year visibility and quarter-over-quarter, here's OpenVault founder and CEO, Mark Trudeau.
Thanks very much, Larry. Yes, just some of the key findings here and highlights, and then we'll get into the specific numbers here in a bit. But as Larry pointed out, usage growth it continues to occur, and we see much higher levels than we saw even during the height of the pandemic, which we'll get into. But it's returning to some pretty normal seasonality in terms of the higher months are continue to be the higher months. We've seen a little bit of a dip here in the second quarter. So there is some seasonality that seems to have come back, albeit at higher levels than pre-pandemic. There's certainly been a big uptick in power users, which is probably not surprising, but that correlates very strongly with faster speed tier adoption. There is that strong correlation, which we've tracked now for a number of years, between speed and usage. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. One of the things that we see, and it's probably never been more prevalent, is the opportunity that operators have to drive ARPU. Given the changing usage behavior, there seems to be a lot of what we call low-hanging fruit opportunities to monetize what's really happened here. So we'll dive into all these things in some more detail here as we go through this.
Thank you, Mark. And we'd like to start off and get you involved, keep you awake, keep you interested on our first poll of the day. We have two of them, and we're now going to start this poll. Based on the clear trend toward higher usage and the growth of higher speed plans, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, how prepared do you feel you are in your network planning? Not at all prepared, not very prepared, neutral, somewhat prepared, very prepared. Higher usage growth, higher speed plans. Just give this another few moments. And by moments, I mean 15 seconds. Okay, thank you for participating. Last votes, bring them on in. Okay, thank you. And here's what we've learned. Most people feel somewhat prepared. A few people not very, and some are very prepared. Some are neutral. Well, we'll get into some of the impacts that you'll be facing. One of the aspects of what we're going to be seeing in the future has already been seeded by what's happening now. The seeds of future consumption increases are likely being planted by subscribers' migration to faster speed tiers. This is having impact throughout the networks. And to get into it, here's Mark.
Thanks again, Larry. So yeah, just to jump right into the numbers here, we are seeing a continued growth, as I mentioned, over even what we saw during the height of the pandemic. So second quarter of 2020 was obviously the period where lockdowns were prevalent. We saw a lot of changes in usage behavior during that time period. And I think everybody thought that usage would revert back to some pre-pandemic levels. Not only has that not happened, we've continued to see growth, despite the fact that a lot of these lockdowns now have either gone away or at least been lessened a bit in these past few months. So we saw 14% growth here in the second quarter over what we saw in the second quarter of 2020. But again, some of these normal patterns and seasonal patterns have taken hold. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But continued growth seems to be that's the norm. If there's a norm out there, it's just continued growth year over year, and that hasn't stopped. That's been the case every year since our inception 11 years ago. So one of the things, there's a reason we're bringing this particular solution up is we get asked all the time, what type of traffic is consuming all this data? You saw 433 gigabytes per household. That's a lot of data. What applications are actually being used to drive that kind of growth? So we're actually soon to be formally launching a new product, and I only bring it up because we want to answer those questions for our operator customers. We want to be able to do a deep dive into what is the breakdown of is it gaming that's driving this traffic? Is it streaming video? I think we all have an idea, but there's still a lot of questions out there about the specifics of that and doing some granular analysis. So in Larry, the next slide actually just gives even a higher level view of what we're going to be able to show operators out there. And again, I bring it up because we're going to start feeding this into the OVBI report so that we'll be able to look at, okay, here's the growth in terms of total volume, but also here's where it's coming from. Here's what your subscribers are actually doing. And there are actually a number of use cases for this product. And once we have, and we've gotten great feedback on it thus far for those operators we've introduced it to, because I think it's going to add a lot to this analysis and what you're going to see on a quarterly basis. So as soon as we get a statistically significant number of subscribers that we're tracking and networks that we're tracking with this type of traffic, we will start to include this in the OVBI report. All right, another thing that we continuously track, for those of you that have been on these webinars before, we like to look at the impacts of different types of billing plans, right? We have the flat rate billing, which we'll call the unlimited, kind of all you can eat billing plans, where you pay your monthly recurring fee and it's as much data as you consume, versus the usage-based billing type of programs where there's typically a quota assigned per speed tier. And the trend continues here, where we see a difference in usage behavior. And as you can see by the numbers bear themselves out and have continued to do so. They've done it historically and seem to be continuing to do so, where the unlimited operators offering unlimited plans of flat rate billing seem to experience a higher amount of usage on their network on average than those operators that have usage-based billing in place. And that's not necessarily huge news. I think everybody would kind of assume that, but we start to see some big differences when we look at power usage, and we'll get there here in a bit. But this we always like to point out. So the average unlimited usage provider, their average household looks to be about 450 gigabytes per household, whereas those operators that have UBB in place, they are experiencing about 420 or so gigabytes per household. Okay, another thing that we always like to point out is how does median usage, what's that look like? It's one thing to look at average, but that can be somewhat deceiving if you have a small number of real super power users dragging up the average. The median in many ways is even more meaningful because it's indicative of what's going on across your entire subscriber base. So, and again, when we compare flat rate billing to UBB, first of all, we saw 23% higher median usage. So, it's growing faster than what the average usage. If you recall, the average usage is growing at 14%, median usage at 23%. Again, indicative of the fact that your entire subscriber base is using more. And that's important when it comes to network planning and what have you. But if you look at that insight bullet there on the bottom, this is really important to show that those operators that have the unlimited flat rate billing in place are seeing a dramatically higher percent growth of median usage than those with usage-based billing in place. So again, just further indication for those operators that are trying to decide whether they want to move towards usage-based billing. The proof is in the pudding here, as far as the fact that usage-based billing plans, they do help to curtail usage growth a bit. And we have a lot of statistics as well on the fact that almost all operational metrics improve when operators move towards those plans. And we'll talk about that and the impacts of UBB, down the road here. So thanks, Larry. We can move on.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark mentioned power users, and now we're going to get into that. And one of the things that we saw in the past quarter is the percentage of power users with 1 terabyte or more of usage grew nearly 24% and year over year. And now we'll get to the specifics.
Yeah, and we look at power users a little differently than we used to. Again, for those of you that have participated in these in the past, we used to have a 250 gigabyte category. Now you see median usage is even over 250 gigabytes. So we can't look at those subscribers as power users anymore. We now look at power users as over a terabyte, and really the super power users now we've started to track over 2 terabytes, which is a tremendous amount of data. But you could see the growth there, 50% increase in subscribers, using over 2 terabytes of data. And, this is where we're seeing the biggest growth in terms of, percentage increase to these categories. So it just tells us, usage behavior has and continues to change tremendously. And if you think about lockdowns and you think about the fact that now, you've got multiple people within a household that are streaming video simultaneously on different devices, and the impacts of that, this data consumption adds up pretty quickly. And so what we're really trying to do here is just highlight the fact that habits are changing, but it's driving this tremendous increase in usage, and operators really need to be prepared for it. Now, again, back to the story of flat rate versus usage based. This is where we really see some tremendous differences as well, right? I mean, you're seeing 20% more of those extreme power users on these networks that have flat rate billing in place. And again, not necessarily surprising when you have unlimited usage. But where operators, I think, need to be a little bit careful is if you're in a market where you've got operators that do have usage-based billing in place and you don't, you are going to attract all of those super power users to your network, right? Because nobody wants to get hit with extra overage fees, et cetera. So this spread is going to continue to widen. And that's going to have huge impacts on your network. I mean, we as we talked up front, we don't have a lot of data in the webinar, particularly about network health. But one of the things that we see often is all of these networks are shared, whether it's a DOCSIS network, a fiber network. In many ways they're shared networks. And a single subscriber can have a very negative effect on other subscribers in the surrounding areas. So as you see more and more of these super power users, operators really need to focus on and be able to hone in on and identify who they are in real time to be able to understand what their impact might be on the subscribers around them, because that's going to drive phone calls, that's going to drive truck rolls, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really, really important information, I think, to understand, again, how UBB actually does help to curtail and prevent just these superpower users from getting out of control. Yeah, so we always talk about, again, correlation between speed and usage, but here we're going to continue to focus just for a second on usage tiers and how that has changed over time. So why don't we take a look at the okay, I guess we're going to get to the chart here in a second. But as we pointed out, usage-based billing providers, again, are helping to slow the growth of extreme power users, right, compared to the unlimited network operators. So that's kind of another implication. One thing that we don't have a lot of stats in this particular webinar, but if you're interested, just feel free to reach out to us, is we track both upstream and downstream. Upstream is an area that for a lot of operators, especially the cable DOCSIS providers, have some limited capacity issues that they have to deal with on the upstream side. And upstream has grown faster than downstream. And certainly right when the pandemic hit in the second quarter of 2020, we really saw a tremendous increase in upstream, obviously driven by things like these, video calls, et cetera, et cetera. So really important to keep track of not just total usage, but which direction we're talking about. Okay, again, median usage just continues to grow at a much faster rate than average usage. So we can't just focus in on the power users. We have to look at the fact that behavior is changing across the board, but this presents an opportunity. It's a monetization opportunity if you've got the data and you can really dive into it, which we will be talking about here in a little more detail.
Thank you, Mark. And that takes us to our second poll, which will launch in just a moment. We talked about upgrade packages earlier and a chance to increase ARPU and quality of service. So the question is, if you could have a tool that looks at broadband usage by speed tier and identifies those subscribers who would benefit from an upgrade, resulting in higher ARPU and satisfaction, would you add that solution to your tool set of network management? This is a level of interest question. Just give that another 20 seconds or so. A new tool to help you. Another 5 seconds. Votes are coming in. It's very exciting. Okay. Thank you very much. Ending the poll, and let's share the results. And it looks, most people are mildly, if not extremely interested in a tool like that and having this kind of visibility, which, big shock, we're going to get into and talk to you about how that can be done. Back to you, Mark.
All right, thanks, Larry. Yeah, so shifting gears here for a second to look at speed tiers. We do also track, what subscribers are actually provisioned for. And as you can see here now, we have over 10% of all subscribers that at least we track. And as Larry pointed out up front, we're tracking millions and millions of subscribers. Over 10% of them are now provisioned at a gig speed. I think operators are doing a great job of promoting that service. I think we all know that not many subscribers actually can even use a gig service, but they're kind of future-proofing themselves by migrating and upgrading to that speed. So operators have had good success in getting subscribers to move up to that level of speed. Now, this is kind of I think enlightening that. We used to, it wasn't that long ago when, 20 megs per second, was a fast speed, right? But now we're seeing 80% of subscribers actually are choosing a speed tier now of 100 meg or faster. Now, this is somewhat a function of a few things. One, you've got some operators that are automatically upgrading speeds across their customer base. You've got many operators who are, their slowest package is 100 megabits per second for new subscribers. And you have a lot of subscribers themselves that are either self-selecting or through a campaign offered by an operator upgrading to these faster speeds. So now we're seeing 80% of subscribers over 100 megs per second. And it seems to be the sweet spot of 100 to 200 meg actually, and about half of all subscribers fall into that range right now, which really is kind of a tremendous shift, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Yeah, not surprisingly, where are a lot of them coming from? It's the slower speed tiers, right? And a lot of subscribers, especially during the pandemic, for all the reasons we talked about, usage behavior changing, they simply have more bandwidth needs within the home. So they're moving up to the faster speed tiers, and so we're seeing a big decline actually in those slower speeds. Now, this presents actually an opportunity, right? So we are seeing a big decline, but we also see a tremendous amount of subscribers that are still what we call under provision for their usage behavior and for their needs. With simultaneous streams going on, with Zoom calls and work from home and all the bandwidth that requires. What we often see are subscribers that simply are, even many of them are power users that are still on a 20 megabits per second plan. Or one of the things that we're able to track is how close are you coming to your provision speed. We call that our clipping analytics report. So ultimately, how much of the pipe going into your home are you chewing up? Because you might not necessarily be in the top tier of usage for your particular speed tier, but you might have frequent scenarios where you're actually bumping up against what you're provisioned for and experiencing poor service in your mind. But the reality is you simply need a bigger pipe going into your home. So being able to help operators identify who those subscribers are to drive upgrades can really be impactful, not just in terms of driving ARPU, but certainly customer experience, quality of experience.
Thank you, Mark. And we're going to jump into right now what to do about that information. Our report, to quote from that, the correlation between elevated usage and accelerating speed demand and speed tier demands creates an opportunity for you or network operators to be proactive in the pursuit of creating that best customer experience for all subscribers while improving your ARPU. So let's talk about that. This is the heart of the feature that we want to talk about.
Yeah, so just to stay on, the shift in what we'll call the distribution of usage here first is over time here, you can see what has happened. If you look at the bottom, the dark blue column there, and you see how that has ultimately shrunk over time, and that's the 0 to 100 gigabyte category of subscribers. So you're seeing fewer and fewer of those subscribers on the network, right? And that's been a trend that we've seen. You're looking back now 4 years, right? And it's gone back even further than that. Just a complete shift in the distribution of subscribers across these different usage levels. Not surprisingly, you're seeing a huge increase at the top level, as we've talked about, in terms of the growth at those 1 and 2 terabyte and higher customers. So if you kind of look at the specific percentage drop, you're seeing 43% reduction in subscribers in that 0 to 100 gigabyte category. And the reason we're highlighting this, you'll see in a second, is because of the correlation we're going to talk about between this and kind of looking at the same thing as far as speed tiers. But Larry, I think the next one kind of highlights the growth at the top end being over 500% here of subscribers, growing from 2% of subscribers over a terabyte back in 2018 to now nearly 11%. So huge growth in those power user categories. In fact, you're seeing also just huge growth over 500 gigabytes, right? 500 gig to a terabyte category there, a 237% increase. So really just sticking with that theme, huge change and shift in how subscribers, the volume of usage of the subscribers across the customer base. Now, if we shift again to speed tiers, now we see very similar charts here, right? In terms of subscribers ultimately, big decline in those that are that says greater than 50 meg. It should show less than 50 megabits per second, 50 meg or less. A big decline in subscribers that are provisioned at those very slow speeds. So that's 58% reduction here in the last 3 years. And just like we showed on usage, the growth in speed tiers at the top levels is actually growing 500%. So strong correlation again between speed tier growth and the migration versus versus usage. And you see that chart there that from over half of subscribers back in 2019 to now 20% are at 100 megabits or less. So here's a couple things that I think a lot of times we see operators lose sight of a little bit is when we talk about upgrade candidates. It's really important to identify who they are and push in a proactive way to get those subscribers to upgrade. But it's not just about ARPU, right? It's about providing a better quality of experience for the subscriber. It's those same subscribers that are misprovisioned, and we've done a lot of correlation analysis on this as well. So same subscribers that are actually calling into the call centers and customer care and they have issues with their service. Again, there's nothing wrong necessarily with the network health or anything. It's simply the size of their pipe going into their home is not big enough. So that drives phone calls. So if you can upgrade subscribers, you're going to get fewer phone calls into customer care. As a result, we all know that, a lot of times the default answer is we'll roll a truck out and send a field tech to take a look at your service. A lot of times those are wasted. They're unnecessary because, again, it's got nothing to do with what's going on in the plant or in the network itself. So it's going to result in fewer phone calls and therefore fewer truck rolls and ultimately a higher net promoter score. So almost every operational metric improves when you have upgrade campaigns in place, or at the very least, arm customer service with that information so that when a subscriber calls in, they've got the ability immediately to see what the issue is and diagnose the issue. If it's actually that the customer is misprovisioned, then they'll know not to roll a truck. They'll suggest an upgrade. You could come up with an upgrade promotion, which a lot of operators obviously do. We'll give you the next speed tier for 3 months for free. There's lots of things you can do to drive that customer to a higher speed. And that is going to prevent that next phone call into customer care and that next truck roll, et cetera. And the customer is going to be happier at the end of the day. And you as an operator are going to drive more ARPU. So, we look at this at a very granular level, and our tools are kind of designed to look at subscribers based on their specific speed tier, their specific characteristics, their usage behavior at a very granular level. And we've been able to identify that, a lot of subscribers, certainly if you look at that, at the gray color there, 40% of subscribers that are on those lower speed tiers, and there's still a lot of them out there, in our view, are upgrade candidates. Whether it's because they're using a huge amount of volume, or as I mentioned, they're misprovisioned for their needs. And then you see what that looks like at every one of those speed tier levels. Certainly, once you get up to 500 megabits per second in a gig service, for a lot of subscribers, there's nowhere to go, and frankly, they don't really need an upgrade so much. There might be other issues if they're having service issues, but at these lower speed tiers, almost across the board, we can see that there are opportunities here. And as we stated across our customer base, we think there's about 22% still of all subscribers that are upgrade candidates. And when you think about it, there's never been a time when usage behavior has changed more than it has in the last 18 months on a per household basis. So it's not surprising, but it's an opportunity. And so this is something that we continue to try to counsel our operator customers about and provide them with the data and the tools to take advantage of this. A few OVBI reports ago, we started what we call the Broadband Household Index, which kind of looks at, there's the average characteristics of a household. And that includes things like the usage, which we've talked about, your average downstream and upstream speeds that you see there. How many streaming services, we get this from some third-party sources, streaming services, devices. Many people don't realize just how many devices now are connected within the home, and the quality of those devices, right? The quality of the video that's getting served up is increasing and improving all the time. So we always get a kick out of these reports we see sometimes that talk about usage growth slowing down, and the usage is, growth is going to come to a halt. There's no more need for bandwidth, et cetera, et cetera. That just couldn't be further from the truth. And we never know what that next application is going to be. We don't know what the next device that's chewing up more and more bandwidth is going to be. So we have to plan for that growth to continue. What we're going to be adding to this, as I talked about a little earlier, soon is information on the actual traffic, right? And what's that breakdown of, is it streaming video? Is it gaming? Is it something else that's chewing up all this data? So we'll be able to add this to what we call our average broadband household index. So, in conclusion here, before we get to some Q&A that's come in, we certainly have seen a resumption of what we call seasonal usage patterns. Typically we see obviously very high usage during the holiday season, through the first quarter, and then things start to slow down a little bit. Usage comes back to earth a little bit in the second quarter, and even the third quarter during some of the summer months. And then it picks back up, and we've started to see that curve reflect what it did pre-pandemic. Last year, we could throw out the window. We saw the second quarter being the highest on record. Then things did kind of settle in a little bit, but then they kept picking back up here in the fourth quarter. So now a resumption to seasonal patterns has certainly occurred. Growth, as I mentioned, has continued, and it's not just being driven by a few subscribers. It's across the subscriber base. We talked a lot about median usage here, growing faster than average usage. It's something that operators really need to pay attention to. A lot of operators, kind of play whack-a-mole with with the real power users, but they're not always the ones that you need to think about. It's behaviors changing across the board. So again, customer experience is, as we all know, critical. This higher usage can be an indication of those operators, those subscribers that are going to have customer experience issues. So staying out ahead of it, both in terms of upgrading your network capacity, availability, as well as identifying those subscribers for upgrade, can help future-proof customer experience. You'd rather stay in front of it, right, than be reactive. So, speed is just that strong correlation again between speed and usage. It's an opportunity. It should be recognized. And as you upgrade your networks to faster and faster speeds and offer this up to subscribers, you should expect an increase in usage. We always get these questions from our operator customers, hey, we're going to upgrade everybody that's less than 100 megabits per second up to 100. We don't really expect any change in usage. But we want to make you guys aware of it. We always kind of raise our hand and say, well, you should rethink that, because you're going to see an increase in usage. You might not think that's going to change usage behavior, and it might not change behavior, but because of what the faster speeds give you and the likes of a streaming service like a Netflix with adaptive bit rates and whatnot, you're going to see an increase in consumption. It's just reality. So we really try to help our operators plan for that and understand what to expect, because chances are we've seen it before. And again, we've hit home on this a lot, but and it goes beyond just driving ARPU. As I mentioned, every key operational metric in your organization will improve if you're focused on providing operators with the bandwidth they need. And I would even go so far as to saying, pushing for something a little above what they might need, because we all know growth is continuing. If they don't need it today, they're going to need it tomorrow. So having that data, that visibility, and the tools to take advantage of that and really push it on your customers, trust me, they're going to be happier in the end. And we've seen it time and time again. And that's really what we're talking about, right? Is having the tools of visibility, the insights, et cetera. And I think what's really important is all operators, are dealing with the same issues, right? I mean, you're not providing something that somebody else isn't. I mean, everybody tries to differentiate themselves, of course, but at the end of the day, operators across our customer base are all faced with the same challenges. So being able to leverage lessons learned across customers, and put in place best practices with a set of tools like this is really, really critical and important for operators to understand. You get the collective thinking of all the customers that have deployed these kind of tools when you do it this way, as opposed to just buying a product off the shelf that doesn't have these kind of insights built into it. And, we actually had a really strong reaction to this after our last webinar. So we're continuing to offer this for those operators on the call, on the webinar, that haven't had a chance to kind of see this stuff in action, what the impacts are on your network. We're happy to do trials and things like that to help you just have a quick picture of what's going on in your network. Where are your opportunities? Where are your monetization opportunities, et cetera. So by all means, reach out to us if that's something that you're interested in. And then really just at a high level here, before we get to the Q&A, we're focused really in two specific areas, as you see: network optimization, diagnostics, helping operators understand, where they have network issues, but also goes beyond that. Things like the health of the Wi-Fi network and diagnostics, et cetera. Monetization and customer engagement is another big focus of ours, helping operators, as we've mentioned, drive ARPU, engage with customers, help educate customers and customer care what's going on, and just doing really, really deep subscriber analytics. And kind of the neat thing that happens with all of our customers is that, over time, we might go in through network engineering first, but then ultimately when marketing gets wind of the fact that this data and these analytics are available, they become interested in it. So, a little, anecdotal, a little story here about what we have experienced with some operators is you'll see parts of a network that are extremely congested, but marketing has no idea. So they're out there, promoting gig service as an example to those specific customers in areas of high congestion. Well, that's going to backfire on everybody. So giving this information across the organization in a cross-functional way really enhances the communication between these different groups and ultimately improves what they're doing out there in the market. So this becomes very much a cross-functional tool, not just an engineering tool.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you in advance for clearing the next 30 minutes of your time to answer all the questions coming in. It may not be 30 minutes worth of answers, but we did get about 5 questions that we'll get to. But before that, a reminder for those interested, we got a couple requests about are we sharing the slides. The content that you've seen here goes into even greater depth in some cases on the actual report itself. You can go to openvault.com and click on the 2Q21 OVBI and download the PDF of the report, and then you'll have it. This webinar itself, the recording, will be posted on our YouTube channel, and you'll have a chance to watch this or send a link to someone else that you think can benefit from this for them to watch. So this information will be available after the webinar itself. And in addition to the report itself, as Mark mentioned, we got a great uptick in take on our 30-day trial offer. So get in touch with us at sales@openvault.com if you're interested in that, or frankly, any of the solutions that you saw today, including the traffic analyzer that we focused on and the benefits that provides. So that takes us to Q&A. Like I said, we got a bunch of questions coming in. So let's start with this one. Regarding your ability to identify upgrade candidates by looking at usage speed tiers. Okay, we just talked about that. How do you identify specific customers, and how often should we run this kind of program?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about how different ways in which we can help identify upgrade candidates, based on usage volumes, based on as I say, the speed clipping, how close are they coming to their provision speeds, et cetera. But I think the answer to the question is how often is constantly. Usage behavior is changing across the board, and every single month there's growth. So this is something that operators should really pay attention to and look at on an ongoing basis, and have that visibility and provide that visibility to customer care, so that whenever they get a phone call from a customer that has a speed issue or has a service issue, they've got that information at their fingertips. So it's something that constantly needs to be monitored, and it's not a one-time thing where you do this and then you can kind of walk away. It's you owe it to yourselves and your subscribers and the value of your company to kind of do this on an ongoing basis.
Mark, another question. You showed a tool called the Traffic Analyzer. Can you give us a couple of use cases?
Yeah, so the one that I talked about really was traffic classification, right? The ability to define what categories of usage are actually consuming all this data that we keep reporting on. Services like Netflix, Twitch, Facebook, et cetera, and CDN traffic from Akamai and Level 3, et cetera. These things, we have the visibility into those to be able to categorize them all the way down really to the subscriber level. So that's one of the really neat use cases about it. Kind of real-time visibility into client server network traffic at a high level is another one. Security risk and threat detection. So, IP addresses with, IP reputation threats, denial of service attacks, IoT risks is another area that having visibility into this data can really, really help from a security perspective. And lastly, from a capacity management standpoint and planning, helping with planning, things like peering traffic, right? So these are all different use cases that the traffic analyzer will be able to help operators with. And as I said, we've seen some great feedback. It's actually, if for those that are familiar with deep packet inspection and those solutions, it's a much less intrusive solution and a much more cost-effective way at getting at this information. And when we're able to aggregate it with all the other data we're collecting across the network, really again, down to a granular level, it presents some amazing insights. And we're really excited about adding this down the road here to the OVBI report. We think it's going to be very well received.
Thank you very much. Question is, are you able to provide more information regarding upload speed trends?
Yeah, we do. We do have that information in terms of the provision speeds of customers and how that has changed. So by all means, we can have whoever asked the question, we can have sales reach out and get to some granular information on that. But we track speed, both upstream and downstream speeds. We have historical data, and we track that and look for trends, et cetera. So happy to share that information.
Okay. And a question just about the collection of the data. Are the numbers presented U.S. focused, or are these global?
These particular numbers are U.S. focused. We do have data that we can share in both Latin America and in Europe as well. We don't have quite the critical mass of data that we do in the States, but that pool of data is growing, as we add customers. So we're always very careful to make sure we have a statistically significant amount of data to be reporting. I think the other unique thing about different regions that we have to be careful of is in Europe in particular, you've got ultimately every country is a bit different, right, in terms of the speed tiers offered, et cetera, et cetera. So while that's the case from market to market in the U.S., we've got enough volume where it kind of blends itself out. But in different regions, we have to be very careful not to make a statement about data that might not apply in every country. So, but yeah, the data that you're seeing here in today's webinar is very much focused on the U.S.
Thank you. Do you have these or equivalent stats for other segments like small, medium businesses, or is it just residential?
No, we track everything. So we do have both commercial and residential that we can break up and share specifics based on those segments. I would say those are kind of the primary two segments. So effectively, we know which subscribers are commercial subscribers versus residential, and so everything you saw here today in terms of speed tier breakdown, usage breakdown, distribution, et cetera, can be viewed both on the commercial side as well as residential.
Thank you. Would your analytics and usage tracking help us with the emergency broadband benefits, or EBB, auditing requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually been approached when the federal funding came out and operators realized they had some compliance to deal with in terms of reporting. So we worked with some of our key customers to help build a standard set of reports that would satisfy the compliance requirements as well as the data storage requirements. There's a history of data that must be stored to be in compliance. So we've got that capability as well. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. We can help with the EBB compliance reporting.
All right. Kind of a technical question. Do you measure the home broadband quality of experience from the device or the gateway?
So we're actually looking inside the home at the health of the Wi-Fi network. So both in terms of the devices connected to the Wi-Fi network, the signal strength of those devices, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a key component to our diagnostics capability, so that, because we also have network health information and can aggregate all of that into one place, a good use case is a subscriber that calls in and has a service complaint, an issue about speed or an issue about connectivity or whatever. customer care has the ability to see, hey, is this a network congestion issue? Is it an issue with, the Wi-Fi network? Is the device on the wrong band, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all designed to provide tech support and customer care with, the information at their fingertips. So that, again, rather than roll a truck out and the field tech out in the field, which of course, these days and during the pandemic and in particular, was not something that anybody really wanted to do, that can be prevented, and customer care can have the information at their fingertips as far as what the real issue is, and can resolve it and avoid some unnecessary costs.
Along those lines, and you may have answered most of this already, but the question is, please describe your Wi-Fi analytics offering.
Yeah, I think that I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. Certainly, we understand now. We have the ability to look at the device topology within the home and across the customer base, which also helps you identify problem devices that might be causing issues on your network, et cetera, et cetera. So this can be looked at from an analytics perspective at a high level across the network, or at a very granular level inside the subscriber's home. And that piece is designed to help with diagnostics. So yeah, the analytics is pretty broad. It can be both at a high network level, but then more granular as well.
Thank you. Two more questions. What experience have you had with actual ARPU growth results from your ability to identify upgrade candidates?
Yeah, I mean, ARPU growth for those operators that have really focused on driving customer upgrades based on need have seen a huge impact on ARPU. And by huge, I mean, we're talking $1 to $2 at a minimum within the first year, up to as high as $7 to $8 within 24 to 36 months. And of course, there's a lot of dependencies there, right? What's the spread of the pricing on the MRC side from plan to plan? Are you getting customers to move up to one speed tier? Are you getting them to move up a couple speed tiers, which can have an even bigger impact on ARPU, right? So there's a lot of variables there when I say that, but there isn't any operator that hasn't seen and enjoyed significant benefits. It's just the degree to how aggressive they want to be, really.
Thank you. And the last question, going back to our forecasting ability based on our analytics, you mentioned things have returned to typical usage patterns, but at higher levels. Do you think this will hold true for this quarter and next, especially with uncertainty in the world with Delta and now Mu virus variations?
Yeah, there's no question. And I heard something the other day that a lot of companies now that are still virtual are starting to, how we've all over time, you'll open up a chat session and that's kind of up and on your laptop all day long. Now you're opening up a Zoom session for all of your employees across, all these remote locations in a virtual world, and you're leaving the Zoom call up all day long. And it's giving people more of a sense of, we're in the office, but we're not. But that type of trend is starting to occur. So you're seeing Zoom on literally all day long for certain people, and you're seeing in some cases multiple people within the house that have that going on all day. So I don't think at all we've seen the end of usage behavior changing. I think we're starting to see obviously more and more companies are moving to remote or some type of a hybrid approach. And so no, growth is going to continue. I mean, we've seen it, time and time again. And believe me, we were really curious to see what was going to happen post pandemic, to see if things were going to, but I think we all at this point know that, the world has changed forever, and certainly broadband usage has changed forever, and it's only though going to continue to grow. So yeah, I think that's the answer there.
Thank you, Mark. That completes the questions, the answers, and the presentation of data and insights that we gained from the last quarter's usage across broadband networks. Thank you for the opportunity to present these findings and implications, and we look forward to doing this again next quarter. Again, if you don't have the report yet, you can go to our website, openvault.com, and download the report, and you can watch and share this video probably at the latest by early next week. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful weekend coming up.